Welcome back to Front Page. And as we had said prior to the break, something big is happening behind closed server doors. Well, for the first time in years, US hyperscalers Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have very quietly hit pause on new data center leases in India. Not because demand is weak, but because trade intentions between New Delhi and Washington have suddenly made long term bets look a lot riskier than they did a few months ago. According to top industry executives, the deals are still on the table, in the pipeline, but not signed yet. End quote. It's actually a polite way of saying we're waiting to see what Trump does next. And here's what triggered that chill. In August, the US government imposed 25% tariffs on Indian exports only to raise them to 50% weeks later, citing India's discounted crude oil imports from Russia. Then came the shocker, a $100,000 one time visa fee on new H-1B applications. Together, these moves rattled the economics of data infrastructure. We have covered all of these developments extensively here on Front Page. Please make sure to check it out if you haven't already. Back to, well, the hyperscalers who rely on global supply chains, cross border engineers, and hardware imports that now look, well, painfully uncertain. Even routine procurement, servers, GPUs, networking equipment suddenly carries tariff exposure and customs unpredictability. The impact is immediate and visible. Contracts that once took 60 days to close are now crawling past 180. According to Anarok Capital, hyperscalers today make up 30% of India's total data center demand, and that share was expected to rise to 35% by 2026. But for the last 2 months, no new hyperscale lease has been signed. Instead, lawyers and financiers are busy adding new clauses like this: tariff pass throughs, change in law, phased capacity deployment. Well, the translation to all of that is this: no one wants to be the one holding the bag if the next tariff or visa rule hits mid project. The slowdown couldn't have come at a worse time. India's data center capacity, currently around 1.2 gigawatts, was projected to triple to over 3.5 gigawatts by 2030, driven by the AI and cloud explosion. Global majors like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon were pretty much scouting for multi hundred megawatt campuses across Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu. OpenAI was reportedly looking for Indian partners for its first overseas compute hub. Now, those same deals are being re evaluated, not cancelled, but not advancing either. As one property consultant told CNBC, hyperscalers haven't vanished, they've just hit pause, end quote. The tariffs aren't the only problem. A global GPU shortage driven by AI model training has already slowed down expansion plans worldwide. Add trade frictions to the mix, and even companies ready to spend billions can't reliably plan timelines. It's not just actually about servers anymore, it's about predictability, power, policy, and people. Because hyperscalers sign 15 to 20-year leases, and any disruption, well, from tariffs to export controls, can break the economics of billion-dollar infrastructure overnight. While data center plans froze, another Trump era proposal resurfaced: a ban on US companies outsourcing software and back office work to Indian IT firms. If implemented, it could erase millions of jobs and threaten $80 billion worth of an annual IT exports. The message from Washington is, well, quite clear: America first again, but this time the target isn't just cheap labor. It's actually AI labor. The same engineers who built global digital backbones are now viewed as, well, competition to United States tech workers, and that has downstream effects on infrastructure, planning, capital deployment, and hiring. This crisis, well, is a stress test for India's digital economy. If big tech won't build, the question is, can India? Well, unless domestic players step up really fast, Chinese and Middle Eastern cloud providers could fill that gap. A scenario India wants to avoid for both security and sovereignty reasons. One company already showing the way is, well, Zoho. As we reported earlier on front page, Zoho's Aratai, Messenger, and Zia AI stack run fully on Zoho's own infrastructure, not AWS, not Azure, not Google Cloud. CEO Mani Wembu, well, in a wonderful conversation with us here on front page, said this: owning your own stack isn't just efficient, it's actually sovereign. End quote. It's actually a line India's policymakers might want to remember. Well, for India to keep its digital momentum, policy certainty is key. And here's what analysts suggest: lock in long term power and tariff stability for data parks, offer tax holidays for domestic compute capacity, build sovereign AI clusters under the India AI mission, attract private REITs and insurance funds into the data infrastructure market, train an AI ready data ops workforce to reduce reliance on imported expertise. Well, because in the end, global companies can pause, but India can't afford to. And joining us today are actually distinguished voices decoding what the United States data center slowdown means for India's digital and AI ambitions. Jollydeep Kaur, head of marketing at NxtGen Cloud Technologies, brings over 2 decades of experience in enterprise cloud strategy and AI driven infrastructure, helping shape India's role in the global data economy. And we also have with us Rajesh Bharatiya, founder and CEO of Peoplefy, represents the pulse of India's HR and analytics ecosystem, working with top global MNCs to build high performance technology teams through his award winning Talent Solutions platform. Together, they'll help us explore, well, this. Is this United States slowdown just a pause or a pivotal moment for India to redefine its data center playbook, balancing talent, energy, and AI infrastructure for the decade ahead? Well, let's start with Jollydeep Kaur on whether this slowdown signals a strategic pause or a push for India's self reliant AI infrastructure. Welcome to the show, Jolly. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Sudhi, for getting us on this show. I think this conversation couldn't be more timely.
Hmm,
Over the last decade, we've been growing very fast as a consumer of compute. But
hmm,
now it's a time for us to take stage as the consumer creator, right? So,
hmm, hmm,
sovereign compute creator.
hmm,
Uh, when we look at, answering your question, whether it's a temporary pause, a strategic pause,
hmm,
or structural pullback, in my view, it's neither a panic or a policy retreat. It's more like a recalibration.
okay.
These US forces are optimizing their own strengths. They're looking at how much capex is being spent by them over very, very high interest rates. There is tariff frictions. There are hardware bottlenecks. So while all these things happen, India still remains a very strategic growth market. Uh,
Hmm, hmm,
Now the question
hmm,
is, what is changing, and who will build this next layer of capacity? We are seeing a very structural rebalancing here, from being foreign funded to now a sovereign co-created infrastructure.
hmm.
I think it's a healthy time for India for building a long-term resiliency on the infrastructure, leadership.
Fair enough. Rajesh, welcome to the show. Uh, Basically, what I wanted to, of course, start off the conversation with you on was this: India's homegrown players can actually seize this opportunity. Is this actually a temporary pause or, again, a structural pullback with basically Amazon, Microsoft, and Google freezing new data center leases in India? Are we witnessing a short term tariff reaction or the beginning of a strategic shift in how US big tech views India's digital infrastructure market?
No, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Pleasure.
Coming to your question, I think there are many factors playing over here, and like my co-panelists spoke about, it is, I would say it's both, in the sense we were taking few things for granted that this will happen. The global players will, put the capex and things will happen
Hmm.
here.
Hmm.
But now India needs to rethink their strategy, because you need to start creating a backup plan in case this does not happen. But
Sure.
first of all, it's a big setback in a way where if India wants to achieve the targeted capacity of 5 gigawatt by 2030, I think a
Yes.
large heavy lifting would have been done by the giants like Microsoft, Amazon,
Hmm.
Google, and others.
Hmm.
So right now it's too early to conclude in any which way, but it is definitely an eye opener for people in India, for the people in power or people in tech, to see how we can have a backup mechanism, um, alternative mechanism to build of our own, but we don't have the kind of capex that these companies can bring in.
Hmm.
So, if possible, I think we should the people should go into analyzing further what's really causing. I don't see tariff as a problem. I don't see
Okay.
H1B fee as a problem. It
Mm-hmm.
could be more of a situation, political situation, where somebody doesn't want to be seen as putting up big spend in India and creating more jobs in India. So
Okay.
that could be a reason, is what I believe.
Very interesting. Jolly ma'am, would you agree with what Rajesh just mentioned? Do you think it could be one of those aspects which is just something which is flying under the radar? Hello? Yeah.
I think the government is taking a lot of steps in India. Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there seems to be a yeah, there seems to be a
Subhajit, are
connection
you there?
problem, Jolly. At I think at your end, it's quite patchy. The connection. I think, well, till we get Jolly back, Rajesh, I like to actually move on to the next aspect. How fragile is actually India's data ambition without US capital? If hyperscalers hold back, can India still hit, like you mentioned, its 3.5 gigawatt data center target by 2030? Or will this pause expose how dependent India's AI and cloud ecosystem remains on foreign infrastructure money? You just mentioned that, of course, we need to analyze, but do we have the time? Is the point. Because we all know how predictable Trump is.
Sudhir, for whatever connection issue or something, I see the voice is not coming very clear, but I kind of got the question, and I believe India needs those partners, those giants to spend the kind of capex that each of those companies like Microsoft and others, they spend. Can I continue?
Yeah, yeah, please, please, please. Please.
Yeah, so almost 30 to 40 billion dollars USD they spend every year on the cloud infra.
Hmm.
Nobody in India currently in his position to spend that kind of money. And this other thing is, they once such data centers are established, these companies can become the first occupier of the data center, by which they can guarantee a lot of you know usage happening, and making it economically viable for the people who are putting the money over there. So definitely we need these companies to come in. That will be a big
Well,
ask,
what if the
but
policy
parallelly
doesn't allow it,
such
Rajesh?
events are happening.
What if,
And like
unfortunately, the
you said, we
policy
are
doesn't
commenting
allow
too
it?
early. Even recently, Google announced something about setting up something in Vizag in Andhra Pradesh. So there's a mixed reaction right now, but basically a wake up call. I would say to our people over here to start building something in parallel.
Jolly, good to have you back. If you've heard what Rajesh just mentioned, I just wanted to actually follow up on that and ask you this: what if actually the policy doesn't allow it? Fair, it is a wake up call, but according to you, Jolly, what do we really need to do in terms of the fact that how do we fill this gap? I mean, the portents are already there. There has been an entire aspect which is already, the bell has rung. What if the policy doesn't allow us? What are we going to do then?
I believe that while we are maturing as a market, I mean, we've
Mm-hmm.
seen the last decade, these hyperscalers have really seeded the capacities. But now domestic market is also growing. They're stepping
Sure.
in. The large government companies like BSNL, Railtel, Power Grid, all of these are stepping in. The PSU REITs,
Hmm.
the Indian Infra Funds, government is putting in a lot of effort to ensure that we there is a lot of push in terms of the Swadeshi adoption.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you look at how we are growing, I mean, as NextGen alone, we are looking at expanding our GPU infrastructure by about 32% CAGR. So I think 5 gigawatts by 2030 is achievable. It'll come from Indian balance sheets. So we are ready, and I think we're already there on that path. We just need to ensure that the policies are more practical rather than just political, and we're not taking any steps which are just political answers. We do something which
Hmm.
is more long term, which
Yeah.
brings in more resiliency in terms of India as a country. How do we protect our digital boundaries?
Wonderfully put, actually, Jolly, because that is where I think we need to genuinely pour in all our efforts into is the fact that the policy makers need to align with the fact that, yes, tomorrow, like Trump has gone ahead and done this, he is somebody who could actually go ahead and genuinely handicap the way we are growing at the speed at which we are growing. And we need to kind of look within and make sure that we are in it for the long haul and trying to understand how do we bridge that gap, which actually brings me to this aspect, Rajesh. Can India build its own sovereign compute stack? Should India push for a national version of that, or a homegrown data and AI stack to reduce exposure to US, as Jolly just mentioned? Policy, basically, and ensure long term sovereignty. What do you have to say on that, Rajesh? Need of the hour?
So I think for our own sovereignty and for data protection of sensitive data of Indian citizens, of course, government can have more concrete guidelines. Though we have certain policies announced recently, but it can be given more concise way what data needs to stay within the country and what kind of data can coexist of other countries in
Hmm.
India. But I think without the help of some of the biggest, my personal view is that it will be a difficult task, but yet we have to make a beginning in that direction
Yes. Yes.
of building our own. Because we cannot trust some of our neighbors who where the
Yep.
some of this may go in case India does not take the advantage of being the center of the global data centers. We This is a great opportunity for India, and we will be able to create lot many jobs. It will
True.
help the economy. So I think we should also work on how to make it easier, comfortable, policy wise. How can we give certain
According
terms
to you,
to
what would you like to say to the policymakers? For example, Rajesh, you're
sorry.
saying in terms of policies. According to you, what would you like to say to the policymakers? For example,
I didn't get the question. Sorry.
I'm asking you. You're talking about the policies, the policy aspect of it. What would you probably
Mhm.
like to suggest to the policymakers? How should they go ahead and envisage those policies?
So there are three sides to it. One, I'm saying we need to have our policies unambiguous to the IT giants who can play a big role in setting up such centers in India. We
Mm,
should create so that they don't have any uncertainty about some retrospective, some rules coming, and so we need to create a very open kind of policy where the risk or the uncertainty amongst them should go away, and how we will like for example, one of our giant neighbor, there's always a fear that the data may be asked by the government. There's a fear that data may be misused.
mm.
India can make it very clear that it is the safest place. So that could be one way to mitigate some of the pause that's happening from the global giants.
Okay. Jolly, I wanted to understand this. Taking a page out of, let's say, Zoho's playbook. Zoho forever has had that policy at the root of its, right from the inception, that they've kept their data, they've kept their infrastructure sovereign. Do you believe that now, with something like this taking place, a lot of companies should maybe look at that model as well? It's very important for us to do that. And second, I would ask you also the same question. What would you like to suggest to the policymakers before, of course, I move on to the other aspects of things?
So the last part was not clear. Could you please repeat what?
I finally, I'll sum it up very quickly for you, Jolly. The fact that Zoho, of course, I hope you've heard what I mentioned about Zoho, and the fact that,
Yeah.
what again would you feel as a very important voice in the ecosystem, Jolly? Would you like to suggest to the policymakers, as I had asked Rajesh, that how should one be tailor making the policies now moving forward?
Yeah. So Sudhir, I think these tariff rises and visa tightening has given us a very, very clear message
Hmm.
that we need local talent. We need to uh, locally we have our own local fabs. We need to have our own local IP. India has always been serving the global, infrastructure requirement,
Sure.
the global AI requirement. It's time for us to own our own, the sovereign piece. How we are going to do it? Uh, we need to, of course, policy play a big role. Governments push on how they support local build, our own industries, our own investors, if they invest into like call for Zoho is very, very taken very, very positively, right? It
Hmm.
brought in a lot of hope to the Indian. You yourself covered a big episode on people who are taking Indian AI use cases globally. So those are the ones episodes which will become very, very uh, encouraging for the local talent, for multiple domestic players to start innovating, operating, and creating a single national, nation locking. So we need to, work on those policies. We have to ensure we have talent which is trained. We ensure that we have resources enough which make the case stronger for an Atmanirbhar
Sure.
digital.
Fair enough, Jolly. And I feel, yes, the momentum is definitely gaining as far as that is concerned, the Atmanirbharta aspect. So, Jolly, again to you. Is Trump's trade war reshaping India's AI roadmap with tariff hikes, like I had mentioned earlier, visa fees choking the talent and hardware flow? Can India still remain the AI back office of the world, or does this mark the start of new decoupling?
Uh, I think it is accelerating it. I mean, uh, it
Hmm.
is um, it is giving us some urgency to take steps
Yes.
to become more resilient, independent from such kind of uh, you know trade wars or geopolitical gimmicks that are
True.
happening. So, and if you look at how we as NextGen we are building our own coding assistants. We've built a
Hmm.
a very nice autopilot, coding autopilot. We're making some cases financial AI use cases. There are regulatory use cases that are being built, all being trained on Indian data by Indian engineers on Indian GPUs.
Nice.
The way we've created the infrastructure. So this is accelerating, in my view, in terms of what we need to do. There's an urgency created. I think a lot of people are coming together to create co-create products which will make global
Hmm.
sense. Uh, I think we showed this by what we did with UPI.
Yeah.
It's just time to place those same tactics to see how we can go global with what we're doing around AI.
Wonderful. So that means clearly, Jolly, there has to be a very, very concerted effort of a pushback. What's
Yes.
the real risk, Rajesh? Delay, dependency, or displacement? So basically, if United States firms pause and China or Middle Eastern players fill the gap, could India's AI infrastructure ambitions turn from self-reliance to strategic vulnerability? Because time is of the essence. Do you agree?
So I think biggest risk is not delay. I mean, we can wait and take a good stand on what needs to be done. The risk is dependency. If we're just going to swap from US cloud to a Middle Eastern or a Chinese option, we're just bringing that same vulnerability, but with a different flag. Uh,
Okay.
the answer is more in how do we create distributed sovereignty? How can we bring in more domestic players? How we can create interoperable stacks? Uh, how is it that we could adopt more and more of open source innovation so that we
Hmm.
do not have these lock-in issues? We're not depending in next gen specifically. We call sovereignty to be built on three pillars. One is your data. Of course, your data should reside in India. Your data centers should be local. The second is technology. What kind of technology are you using? Are you using an
Hmm.
open source technology or a closed source technology? So what is it that is going to create these dependencies for you to be shut because of any such changes, tariffs,
Sure.
geopolitical issues? And the third is your operations. Are you operationally sovereign? Are your people trained to support those technologies? So I think these are very, very important. As at NextGen, we've been fighting this case, lobbying with government, with
Hmm.
enterprise to make this more relevant. But I think the recent incidents, uh, like what happened with Naira, the Microsoft
Sure.
use case, and of course whatever these decisions that are being driven from US has brought in a lot of confidence now in domestic players with the enterprises in India. In fact, leading a conversation, we've been asked, "Can you do sovereign for us? How are you sovereign?" So it's a very welcome step that people are now opening up conversations around how we can bring more
Hmm.
decisions in how we're operating our business. It's not in the hands of some this is a good thing to happen, and we have to ensure that we are making steps to mitigate this dependency.
Fair enough. Rajesh, I of course wanted to ask you this, which is how should India respond? Wait, hedge, or build? Should India double down on domestic REITs, PSU led compute clusters, and local hyperscalers, or hope trade diplomacy restores big tech confidence before the decade's biggest data opportunity slips away? It's a very important one, Rajesh. What do you feel about this?
Sure, I think there has to be a multi-prong approach definitely in the short term. So we need to understand there's a hardware and there's a software, the two sides
Sure.
to it. The software side, yes, India has that lot of talent and capability. The hardware is the real issue where the capex involvements are very, very high. So it may not happen overnight for India, but we have to start making a journey
Fair.
towards it. But at the same time, we should never let go this opportunity of this large data centers being created in India. This should not go to Middle East, Europe, or some other
Hmm.
country
Hmm.
because of various resistance or various things which could be diplomatically sorted out, and so we may lose a huge investment,
So,
FDI coming to India if we lose out on this. So we should definitely iron out our policies, iron out our relations, and
sure.
ensure that those are coming to us. At the same time, we have to start building. This is like making semiconductor in India.
Hmm.
So it was something we could not think of earlier. Now we are on that path, and similarly, these are
Absolutely.
high investment projects. So there has to be more commitment from the government also to walk this way. At the same time, we should bring in that investment that's possible, that will
Hmm.
also create a larger ecosystem in India.
Okay. Your final thoughts, Rajesh, and then of course I will ask Jolly. You of course have spoken about the fact that with this particular development, it has to be an orchestrated, cohesive effort, which is well, policy, diplomacy, and the fact that we have to make sure that we are building and we are building fast. Final thoughts. Where do you see this going?
I think this is a temporary thing. The better sense will prevail on everyone involved, and I think things will be back to India. At the same time, it is a little bit of a wake up call for
Mm,
inside to build our own. So these are two quick
okay.
thoughts.
Fair enough. Jolly, final thoughts as far as this is concerned. What's your final take on the fact that where do you feel this is moving towards?
Yeah. Sudhi, I think we need to do a few things to, like we can look at hedging some short-term risk by having more of domestic GPU parks. We need to accelerate our open standard sovereign stack build up. We need to ensure that we are mandating critical workloads to run only on India hosted compute. And if I think that the kind of requirements that we have, the kind of deployments that we are doing,
Hmm.
we won't just hit the 3.5 gigawatts target. We'll own the next 35 gigawatts of intelligent infrastructure that powers the AI future.
Nice, nice, wonderful. Well, Jolly and Rajesh, thank you so much for joining in and giving your wonderful little insights on this. And I believe it is, of course, the fact that it is a wake up call. It has to be a cohesive effort, as both of you have put it across. We have to build, and of course, the policy has to back that up. Thank you again for being on front page. Well,
Thank you
here is
so much.
our final understanding. This, well, isn't the end of India's data dream. It's actually a recalibration, a moment to decide whether India will be a hosting hub or a hardware hostage. The US pause may actually slow the next wave of data centers, but it might just ignite India's own sovereign infrastructure race. Because, as one analyst told us off record, and this is a gem, when hyperscalers hesitate, sovereigns accelerate.